It began with a whisper. An anonymous Twitter account with fewer than 200 followers posted a screenshot of an email supposedly written by American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen. The subject line read, "We need to control how much truth gets out." It was vague, unverified, and out of character, but it didn't matter because within an hour, American television host and political commentator Rachel Maddow held the printed email in her hand on her nightly political commentary show. "I'm just saying," she smirked, waving the page for the camera. "If this is real, and I'm not saying it is, it shows who he really is." The audience gasped. Who could resist? A prominent American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author, accused of orchestrating message manipulation from inside his influential ministry. That was headline gold. Joel Osteen's phone exploded within minutes. Texts from reporters, alerts from staff, even allies demanded answers. His communications director, Emma, burst into his office. "We're getting crushed." The show ran it like it was gospel. Joel Osteen didn't move. He stared at the screen, watching Rachel Maddow's grin freeze frame between two co-commentators snickering. The caption below read, "Osteen, I'm controlling the truth." Joel Osteen reached across his desk and picked up his own printed copy of the email. He'd already seen it, and he knew something no one else did. It was real, but it wasn't his. At least not the way they thought. "I want a call scheduled," Joel Osteen said. Emma blinked. "With who?" Joel Osteen looked up, calm but sharp. "With Rachel Maddow's show. Tell them I'll come on live tomorrow." Emma's eyes widened. "You're going into the trap." Joel Osteen nodded. "No, I'm bringing the match." Back in the prominent news channel's studio, Rachel Maddow was celebrating. "He won't show," she told producers. "He'll hide behind some staff statement." But the next morning, as the camera crew set up for the segment, one of the stage managers walked over to the host table with the clipboard. She confirmed, "Joel Osteen's coming in person, live, unfiltered." Rachel Maddow looked up, startled. "Wait, what?" Too late. The trap had been set, but they hadn't counted on Joel Osteen walking into it with the entire email and the real story. American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen didn't dress to blend in that morning. He wore a sharp navy blue blazer with a subtle silver cross pinned at the collar, an unmistakable symbol of who he was and what he stood for. No talking points, no entourage, just him and a leather folder tucked tightly beneath his arm. As he stepped into the network building, producers glanced up in quiet disbelief. He wasn't flustered, he wasn't defensive, he was composed and early. Backstage, Rachel Maddow was getting final makeup touch-ups, laughing with one of the co-commentators, when the stage manager leaned in and whispered, "Joel Osteen's in the green room." The air shifted. "He actually showed up?" Rachel Maddow muttered. The producer nodded, and he brought something, a folder. Rachel Maddow's smirk flickered. Meanwhile, in the green room, Joel Osteen stood at the mirror adjusting his blazer. Emma texted him from his ministry's headquarters. "You sure about this?" Joel Osteen replied. "She printed the headline. I'm bringing the full page." At exactly 9 p.m., the cameras rolled. The show's theme music played over dramatic graphics. Rachel Maddow's voice opened the segment with practiced charm. "Today we're joined by the prominent, American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen, and apparently the author of a very interesting leaked email." Laughter. Joel Osteen entered the stage to polite applause, mostly from the audience's supporters. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He simply walked to his seat, placed the folder neatly on the table, and met Rachel Maddow's eyes without blinking. "Thank you for having me." Rachel Maddow leaned forward, theatrical. "You're very brave, Joel. Most people wouldn't show their face after an email like that." Joel Osteen's voice was calm. "That's because most people don't want the truth read out loud." Rachel Maddow laughed, feigning confusion. "Oh, so it's not real." Joel Osteen opened the folder slowly, like turning pages in court. "It's very real, which is why I'm here to read the entire thing, not the cropped version you flashed for ratings." A shift ran through the audience. Rachel Maddow straightened. "We're live, you know." Joel Osteen smiled faintly. "Exactly." And with that, he pulled out the email and the trap began to spring in reverse. Joel Osteen placed the printed email on the table with deliberate care, as if preparing evidence in front of a jury. The audience leaned in, even now. Rachel Maddow's smirk had frozen just enough to notice. "You read the subject line, Joel Osteen began, his tone firm but controlled. You read the opening paragraph, but you stopped there because the next 5 paragraphs didn't fit your narrative. Rachel Maddow crossed her arms. We showed what mattered. Joel Osteen didn't blink. No, Rachel, you showed what you wanted to matter. He lifted the first page. This email was sent during a private strategy session where I raised concerns about how external critics, not my ministry, were shaping public truth. This line, he pointed, "We need to control how much truth gets out," was a question I was quoting, not a directive. And here's the sentence right after the one you cropped. He read aloud. If the media keeps manipulating facts about our work, how do we make sure our congregants and the public get the truth unfiltered? The studio quieted, the tone had changed. Viewers watching at home suddenly realized they hadn't been told the whole story. Joel Osteen flipped the page. And then I wrote this: we must ensure transparency. Americans don't need spin, they need facts. Even if the truth is uncomfortable, we owe it to them. Silence. Even the co-commentators exchanged glances. Rachel Maddow tried to recover. Well, maybe you should have been clearer in your language. Or maybe too. Joel Osteen cut in. You should have read past the first sentence before accusing me on national television. The audience gasped. One person in the back clapped once before stopping themselves. Joel Osteen leaned forward. You didn't expose a scandal. You exposed a strategy you didn't like, one rooted in truth and transparency, and rather than invite me to explain it, you tried to frame it for entertainment. Rachel Maddow looked to her producers off camera, clearly unsettled. Joel Osteen held up the final page. This email isn't a confession, it's a call for accountability, one that your team cut, edited, and packaged like clickbait. But since we're live, I figured I'd give your audience what you wouldn't. For a moment, the only sound was paper rustling in his hand. Joel Osteen didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He just read. And that was louder than anything else in the room. For the first time in years, the prominent news channel's studio felt unprepared. Not because of American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen shouted. Not because he made dramatic gestures, but because he didn't. He simply read. Line by line, paragraph by paragraph, he dismantled the accusation. Not with emotion, but with evidence. Rachel Maddow shifted in her seat. Well, even if you wrote all that, don't you think the phrasing was questionable? Why use a sentence like that if you knew it could be misunderstood? Joel Osteen turned to her calm, because I assumed the people reading it would care about context. Clearly, I was wrong. A few audience members laughed nervously. The moment didn't feel like daytime TV anymore. It felt like court. And the Joel Osteen wasn't just defending himself, he was prosecuting the spin. One of the co-commentators chimed in, trying to soften the blow. You have to admit, Joel, the timing of the leak was suspicious. It made you look like a manipulator. Joel Osteen finished for her. That's the game. Leak half a sentence, imply intent, go viral. But the truth is never as exciting as the smear, is it? The camera zoomed in just enough to capture our Rachel Maddow's tight jaw. Joel Osteen reached back into his folder. Since we're here, I also brought emails from the same thread. Here's one where I suggest inviting a wider range of media to our next public statement. Another where I push for full release of our outreach statistics without edits. You want to talk about transparency? Let's talk. Rachel Maddow blinked. You planned this? Joel Osteen didn't smile. No, you planned this. I just came with the whole story. The audience clapped. Not everyone, but enough for the mics to catch it. A few in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide, phones out. Backstage, a producer whispered to the director, "We're losing the room." But it was more than that. Joel Osteen wasn't just winning, he was flipping the entire dynamic. The hosts, once in control, now looked reactive, defensive, and Joel Osteen, he hadn't even raised his voice. He had just shown up. By the halfway point of the segment, Rachel Maddow's confidence had noticeably cracked. Her usual rhythm, sarcasm, punchlines, easy applause had vanished. What was left was a studio that didn't know how to react. Joel Osteen sat tall, his tone unwavering. You say I manipulate truth, but I'm sitting here on your stage reading my words out loud. You tried to make them scandalous, but all I see is transparency. Rachel Maddow scoffed. Come on, Joel. You can't seriously believe this email doesn't at least look bad. Joel Osteen nodded slowly. It looks bad when you cut it in half. Just like a courtroom transcript can be twisted if you only read the prosecution. That's not journalism, that's a performance. The live audience shifted uncomfortably. Some clapped, Others looked to Rachel for a response, but Rachel Maddow wasn't quick to answer this time. She grabbed her mug, took a slow sip, and leaned back. One of the younger co-commentators jumped in, trying to salvage balance. "So, what do you want us to take away from this, Joel?" "That we were wrong." Joel Osteen turned, meeting her eyes gently but firmly. "No, I want your audience to understand what actually happened. I don't need an apology. I just want truth to stop being treated like a political weapon." He paused, then added, "You say I'm dangerous because I speak for my ministry, but I didn't bring my entire organization today. I brought receipts, and that seems to scare you more than anything I could preach." That line hit hard. Backstage, producers were frantically checking comment feeds. Viewers weren't tuning out, they were tuning in. One trending post read, "Osteen's not backing down. He's reading the whole email line by line, no drama, just fire." Another, "Maddow set the trap, but Osteen brought the flashlight." Rachel Maddow leaned forward again, slower this time, her eyes narrow, voice controlled. "Well, if this is your strategy, it's working." Joel Osteen didn't flinch. "It's not a strategy, it's just the truth." Finally given a mic. And in that moment, the most unexpected thing happened. The studio went quiet. Not because Joel Osteen had silenced them, but because they'd finally started hearing him. 10 minutes before the end of the segment, the news show's producers were sweating. The comments section was out of control. Live feedback poured in faster than the moderation team could manage. But unlike past political clashes, this wasn't just tribal cheering. It was different, balanced, curious, even shocked. "I don't even agree with Joel Osteen's theology, but he's eating them alive with their own email." Rachel looks like she's sitting in a courtroom, not a talk show. Osteen's too calm for them to handle. Back on stage, the atmosphere was tense. Not hostile, but tense, like everyone was waiting for something to break. Joel Osteen leaned back in his chair and placed the entire email chain, multiple pages, on the table between him and Rachel Maddow. "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm just asking you to stop editing people into villains." Rachel Maddow's voice was tight. "You do that every day for your ministry." Joel Osteen's response was immediate. "I clarify my ministry's message. I explain our outreach, but I've never taken someone's words, chopped them in half, and waved them around for applause. That's not public service. That's theater." A young woman in the front row, clearly a progressive, nodded slowly, whispering to her friend, "He's actually right about that." Rachel Maddow tried one last angle. "But isn't it fair for us to question someone in power?" Joel Osteen nodded. "Absolutely. Question me, challenge me. I expect that. What I don't expect is for you to build your entire argument on a sentence you refuse to finish." He flipped the final page of the email and highlighted one last quote. "If we fail to speak clearly, we risk losing the public's trust. Let's commit to honest communication even when it's uncomfortable." The audience clapped. Not a cheer, not a standing ovation, just applause. Thoughtful, respectful. One of the co-commentators looked to Rachel, then down at the papers on the table. "Why didn't we show this part?" Rachel Maddow didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was sitting in front of them, clear as day, because it didn't suit the story they wanted to tell. But Joel Osteen, he came to tell the whole one. And now, for the first time in the entire segment, the show no longer belonged to the hosts. It belonged to the guest. Joel Osteen could feel the shift in the room. It wasn't just about the email anymore. It was about credibility. His, theirs, the audience's ability to discern what was real from what was designed. He looked straight into the camera, not at Rachel, not at the co-commentators, but directly into the living rooms of millions watching. "You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with my message. But if you believe in truth, you should be angry about how this was handled." Backstage, one of the social media interns whispered, "We're trending." Another confirmed it, eyes wide. Osteen's appearance is exploding on X. Within minutes, a 47-second clip of Joel Osteen, calmly flipping through the pages, reading his own words with conviction, began to spread like wildfire. The caption, "Joel Osteen brought the whole email and receipts." On Reddit, users debated the ethics of media editing. On Instagram, creators stitched his answer with captions like, "He handled it better than 99% of public figures would." The internet wasn't unanimously on his side, but he had done something rare. He earned respect from people who expected to hate him. Meanwhile, back on the set, Rachel Maddow tried to reclaim control. Well, I guess that's your version of events. Joel Osteen had turned to her calmly. No, that's the version. You showed one line. I showed all of them. Rachel Maddow inhaled deeply, visibly rattled. Well, let our viewers decide. Joel Osteen nodded, eyes steady. They already are. The co-commentators sat quietly, not defeated, just unsure. The segment wrapped. The closing theme played. Polite applause echoed in the studio. Joel Osteen stood, thanked the panel, shook hands with the producer, and walked off the stage with his folder tucked tightly under his arm. Outside the studio doors, the hallway buzzed. Staffers who didn't speak earlier gave him nods of acknowledgement. One camera operator whispered, "That was gutsy." He said nothing, just walked. Back in the green room, his phone was vibrating nonstop. Texts, missed calls, thousands of mentions. Emma had sent a single message. You didn't survive the trap. You owned it. Joel Osteen exhaled for the first time in hours. This wasn't damage control. This was a turning point, and it had just gone national. By the time Joel Osteen's SUV pulled up to his ministry's entrance, the internet had already crowned his moment. The 47-second clip of him calmly flipping through pages on the news show, reading, clarifying, dismantling, was approaching 5 million views across platforms. But it wasn't the numbers that stood out. It was the tone. This wasn't rage bait or partisan spin. It was control, precision, calm fire. Inside his organization's headquarters, staff gathered around screens, their eyes locked on replays and reaction threads. Colleagues who'd previously viewed Joel Osteen as just their leader now spoke with reverence. He went in with nothing but a folder, one advisor said, and walked out with the room. He didn't just survive, another muttered. He inverted the ambush. In his office, Joel Osteen set the now iconic folder on his desk and glanced at his phone. Messages were flooding in, not just from ministry allies, but from surprising sources, neutral journalists, liberal professors, even foreign press. Then his desk phone rang. Caller ID. Victoria Osteen. He picked up, his voice steady. Honey. His wife's voice came through, firm but pleased. Joel, that was genius. You didn't just defend yourself, you exposed them. That was big league. Joel Osteen replied without ego. It was just the truth, dear. I let their own framing collapse under its weight. Victoria chuckled, clearly impressed. You made Rachel Maddow look like she was reading tabloids, and you didn't even flinch. You're not just a pastor, you're a weapon. The call ended. Joel Osteen leaned back in his chair, his silver cross necklace catching a beam of sunlight through the window. It wasn't about his ministry or Rachel or the email. It was about truth and who had the nerve to carry it into fire. Back in his regular public-facing engagements, journalists were behaving differently. The usual posturing, smirks, and gotcha questions were gone. They looked at him with a new kind of tension. One reporter asked softly, "Off the record, how long have you been planning that?" Joel Osteen replied without hesitation. "I didn't plan anything. I just refused to run." Over the next 24 hours, headlines rolled like waves. Osteen flips the narrative one page at a time. Not a victim, not a fighter, a reader of facts. The calm that shook cable news. And then the twist no one expected. A liberal columnist from The Atlantic tweeted, "I disagree with his theology, but Joel Osteen just did what half of public figures won't. Show up, read his words, and let people judge for themselves." It didn't make him a hero to everyone, but it made him impossible to ignore. It arrived in an unmarked envelope. No name, no return address, just a thick beige parcel left on Joel Osteen's desk late in the evening, hours after he had wrapped up his public appearances for the day. At first, he assumed it was another media request, another letter of either praise or protest. But when he tore it open and saw the words printed on the first page, bold, centered, and unmistakably deliberate, his eyes narrowed. This is what real truth looks like. Inside were copies, uncensored, time-stamped, and damning internal emails. Real ones from within the news network's media consultancy team. There were notes from producers, strategy memos, and most strikingly, a transcript from a planning call a day before Rachel Maddow's show aired the clipped email. One line was highlighted in yellow. "We know the quote is incomplete, but it's perfect for air. Push it hard. If he responds, we'll pivot to tone or blame staffers. Either way, we get the narrative out first." Joel Osteen sat in silence, letting the weight of that sentence settle. This wasn't just political gamesmanship. This was premeditated character assassination disguised as a news commentary show. Emma entered the room seconds later, eyes catching the scattered pages. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. Joel Osteen turned the paper toward her. They knew it was incomplete. They aired it anyway. Emma stared, stunned. They played America. No, Joel Osteen replied. They tried to, but we showed up with the ending they never planned for. For the next few hours, Joel Osteen and his team reviewed every pun, cross-referencing dates, validating authenticity. Everything held up. The next morning, he authorized a formal request, not for a retraction, but for an on-air correction. Not just a tweet, not just a press release. A correction delivered live on the same stage where the narrative began. Social media exploded again. This time, not just with support, but with outrage. The network knew it was cropped. How many stories have been edited like this? If the Joel Osteen hadn't gone on, we'd never have known. A TikTok compilation titled, "He Didn't Clap Back, He Read the Whole Thing," hit 15 million views in 2 days. Influencers across the political spectrum dissected his appearance not for drama, but as a masterclass in grace under fire. A Columbia journalism professor tweeted, "What American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen did on national TV wasn't a stunt, it was accountability. He brought documents, context, and composure. That's the standard now." Even harsh critics admitted, however grudgingly, that Joel Osteen had exposed something deeper than a smear campaign. He had exposed a system, one built not on truth, but on the illusion of it. 1 week after his appearance, Joel Osteen stood behind his ministry's podium. The press corps unusually restrained, not silent, but respectful in a way he hadn't seen since becoming such a prominent public figure. A reporter from Reuters raised her hand. "Mr. Osteen, do you think this moment has changed how the public views political media?" Joel Osteen paused, then answered with quiet clarity. "I don't know if it changed their view, but I hope it reminded them to look beyond what they're told and to finish the sentence." There it was again. That line, the one he had posted on X just days before. The one that had now appeared on posters, in classrooms, on t-shirts, and even across protest signs held by people who didn't even agree with his theology. If you're going to accuse someone, finish the sentence. It had stopped being just a comeback. It had become a challenge. That night, Joel Osteen returned to his office, where a framed copy of that tweet now hung beside the original news show headline, "Osteen controlling the truth." Underneath in fine print, he'd scribbled with a gold pen, or just reading all of it. On his desk was another letter, this time from a college freshman in Michigan who had stayed up rewatching his entire appearance for a class on political communication. "You didn't yell, you didn't attack, you just read. And somehow that hit harder than anything else I've seen. It made me think. Not about politics, but about truth." Joel Osteen leaned back, letting the words sink in. He hadn't set out to inspire. He hadn't crafted sound bites in advance. He had just shown up, and that was the power. In an era where noise rules, he had found a way to make silence sharp. Where most entered media battles armed with insults and applause lines, he'd entered with a folder and left with something more: credibility. Later that week, American television host and political commentator Rachel Maddow returned to her show after a brief hiatus. She mentioned Joel Osteen only once, quickly, lightly, and with a dismissive shrug. But the audience's response had changed. A few clapped, a few didn't. Because no matter what was said now, they had seen what happened. They had watched Joel Osteen read every word, not for performance, not for spin, but for clarity. And in doing so, he hadn't just rewritten a narrative. He had rewritten the rules, not by shouting over the noise, but by finishing the sentence and letting it speak for itself. In today's media circus, most people shout to be heard. But American pastor, television preacher, businessman, and author Joel Osteen did something else. He walked into the lion's den, sat down, and started reading. No yelling, no drama, just truth, uncut and unafraid. While American television host and political commentator Rachel Maddow waved a single sentence like a weapon. Joel Osteen brought the full email, every word, every context, every fact. And in doing so, he exposed something far bigger than a television smear. He exposed how easily a half-truth becomes a whole lie. He didn't flinch. He didn't fold. He faced the trap and turned it inside out live on national television. Because in a world where everyone edits, clips, spins, and distorts, Joel Osteen reminded America of the power in simply finishing the sentence. This wasn't just a win for him, it was a masterclass in calm confrontation, a turning point in public discourse, and a reminder to every viewer. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything.